Scaling a business isn't all glossy headlines and overnight success. It's messy, it's tough, and it's full of lessons that no one warned you about. I'm Nikki Jupp, the founder of Talent Gateway, and I've helped over 100 scale-up leaders to build the right team to enable them to grow with confidence. This is Scaling Stories Unfiltered, where founders, CEOs, and leaders share what really happens behind the scenes. No fluff, no filler, just honest conversations to help you grow smarter. So let's get into it.
We talk a lot about hiring as growing companies, but we don't talk a lot about firing.
Yes.
And it's almost just as important to be very deliberate and very direct when something is clearly not working, to take action as quickly as possible.
Chappell is the co-founder and former Chief Innovation Officer of Digital Shadows, a leading cyber intelligence company specialising in digital risk protection and external threat detection. An innovator in cybersecurity since 2011, he has played a pivotal role in helping global organisations safeguard their digital footprints by combining advanced analytics with human expertise. Now let's dive into the interview to hear his insights and experiences firsthand of scaling the business. Welcome, James.
Thanks for having me on.
Let's dive straight in. I don't like to hang about. So could you share your founder journey with us? What inspired you to go from being a security architect to co-founding a business, Digital Shadows?
Yeah, I guess it's a journey that I've enjoyed very much. I think it goes back to before I was a security architect. I'm not going to give you the very long version, but the short version is I graduated as a computer science degree, and as part of that, I did an industrial placement with a telecoms company, which eventually took me in the year 2000, 2001 to Silicon Valley, where I lived through the dotcom bubble, which was a fascinating time. It was both wonderful and horrible at the same time. Obviously wonderful because it's an interesting, disruptive time, and horrible because a lot of people lost their jobs at the end of that period, and it was quite tough. But to be in California at that time, I just learned so much. It was really interesting. And you're just seeing companies that were very small at the beginning and became really huge, and then vice versa, really big efforts to sell businesses that then turned into literally nothing overnight. And then when I came back from California, I joined a consultancy company, and that's the security architect role, the cybersecurity architect role that I did specifically. I really loved that. Looked very diverse. I really recommend consultancy for anybody considering a career in entrepreneurship at some point, because you get to work with lots of different customers doing lots of different projects. So you get a lot of variety over a long period of time. Through that, I got to be part of the leadership team for the cybersecurity profession within the company, which was a company called MEDDIC, now owned by BAE Systems. And then I always felt like I had a business in me. So my father was a second-hand car dealer, but he was an entrepreneur, right? He ran his own business, and I always felt like I wanted to give it a go. I met my co-founder, Alistair, whilst working at the consultancy MEDDIC. We hit it off, got on very well, and we were chatting over a pint of beer that we really, both of us felt quite strongly that we'd like to try doing something on our own. We're talking about what should it be. We got as far as getting lots of different ideas and then grading them and getting some advisors and asking them what we should do.
Very methodical.
Ironically, we had 25 ideas, I think. The idea we actually landed up running with, which eventually became Digital Shadows, the cyber threat intelligence company, was the idea we had at the beginning. So I think probably what I learned from that was that sometimes you should trust your gut and just run with the thing that you think is the things. We that started this wonderful 11-year-long journey from 2011 through to 2022, when we exited that business to ReliaQuest as part of a trade sale. And it's a really valuable, enjoyable part of my life that I'll never regret having been on that journey. It was absolutely wonderful experience.
For anyone listening, one of the things that I've learned, and you will know very well, the challenges that you face getting a business off the ground through that startup journey versus when you're starting to scale. Take us through some of the early challenges and some of the lessons that you learned.
I guess every journey is different. I think you can't say that it is the same for every business. For us, timing was an interesting one. So we were bringing a new product or service to market in a quite a brand new area, and we were waiting to see whether the market was going to respond to it or not. And from 2011 to about 2013, we were really quite experimental. And I'm not sure we had full traction on day one. I'm actually working in a different business now, which has almost the opposite going on. It's like the market was there before the business started and now we're moving into it. So timing's really interesting, and you could be on either side you could either be early or you could be late or you could be just right. And that's going to vary depending on the idea and the market and where you're at. For us at Digital Shadows, we were quite early, but actually it gave us the time to refine the product, really understand what people valued, so that when the market did hit, we were in a great position to really make the most of it. I thought that was an interesting challenge. And actually, the challenge there is really keeping the faith.
Yes.
That the idea is a good one and that it will be something that people, you always have some degree of self-doubt, but validating where it's heading and remaining confident that you've got it right in the first place is key. So, and there are other founders I've spoken to who maybe weren't in that position and needed to pull the plug earlier. So it's a balancing act, and it's your own intuition. You can't really go on anything other than that.
Yeah. And there's no magic formula, is there?
No.
So try and draw on some of the differences between getting the idea off the ground, having that confidence, like you say, and then scaling a business once you know the idea has legs.
Yeah, I guess for us, we decided to go through a venture funding route. So that's quite specific. And there are a lot of very successful businesses that do really well without going down the venture funding road. It's not a given that venture funding is right for every idea or every area. It's also quite prescriptive because there's different expectations at different stages of funding, and you have to set yourself up for that from the off. For us, the sort of difference between founding the idea, seed stage of VC funding, versus scaling it, which is more what you do at a Series A, came through a lot of innovation programs. We did probably about 5 or 6 in the early days. We always found those quite useful because you refine your pitch, you get better at explaining what it is that you do to prospects. So they're always worth doing just for that alone. I think they always promise that they'll give you traction, and very few do. But there was this one we did with Accenture, which is called the Fintech Innovation Lab. This program's still going today, actually. And through that, we got to work with a lot of the tier one banks, innovation teams. They were very interested in what we were doing. And through that, we managed to get our first $1 million in revenue. So we're a B2B SaaS company. So $1 million in revenue was like a bit of a focused amount of revenue to have. And that really was the unlocking of the next stage of funding, really going out to Series A and getting the scaling bit of funding. I'm a big fan of a gentleman called Guy Kawasaki. He was very early in the team at Apple, and he's got this great phrase, sales fixes everything. And I think that's absolutely true, right? It's the traction that gives you the compelling reason to invest in a business. I think that for us, if I could point at one thing, it would be the FinTech Innovation Lab was like a major turning point in our business.
That's quite interesting, isn't it? Sales fixes everything.
Well, yes.
It breaks lots of things.
You can also not sell and learn, right? So you either win or learn also, right? So if you're not winning, you're learning.
Tell us some more about that, again, so that people who are listening, who are going through it, who want to learn from the things that you've done. Give us an example about what might have happened at one of them, something you learned.
Yeah, sure. We were building our product. So one of the things we did on that program was to build the first user interface for our product. So this was serving the people that were getting the value from our capabilities. So what Digital Shadows does is it scales the internet looking for relevant online information that tells a customer about their security posture and tells them about threats in the environment around them. So we had to build this user interface that summarized that information in a way that was useful to those people's day jobs.
Yeah.
So what we did is we built wireframes, we built very early designs, and we got to test them out with the people whose job it was to consume that type of information. We could refine the product so that we could deliver the most valuable information to them in the quickest possible way, cheaper and more effectively than they could do it themselves by building their own capabilities. And that was, you have a value proposition, which is your slide deck, your pitch of what you do, and then there's the actual doing it, the actual building of it. I think getting that bit right was really important for us and quite pivotal. We landed up selling the product as a result of that. Those people then became customers. We were able to reference the types of businesses that were involved in this program, which gave us referenceability, which then gave us credibility with other prospects. So that was quite a key process for us to go through. I think the other thing is we also got involved with some of the groups of people who worked in the areas that we were in, and it turned out there was quite a nice professional network across all of the financial services clients. So we then got known by a community of people. Again, that sort of helped us gain traction. And I think all of this came because of some decisions to focus. I'm a big fan of saying there's three things that matter when you have an early stage business. The first is focus, the second is focus, and the third is focus. And I think what was quite cool is we decided that financial services was our vertical. So that was one way of focusing. We decided a certain area of our products, the threat and exposure, were really important areas. We could have gone after some others, but we didn't. We focused down on those two. And then we decided a list of 100 target customers up front. And again, that allowed us to focus down on a smaller set of folks. And it helped us to avoid, I think in the early stages of any business, you get what I like to call look squirrel moment, where you get distracted by things around you. And actually almost it's an exercise in saying no more than saying
it's tough,
yes.
though, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Really tough, especially when you're you're not paying yourself anything and trying to make the next paycheck.
But I think it's that for me is it's a strong theme that comes through. Either people have learned the hard way and they've had the distractions that, I've got to pay the bills, so I'm going to work with that customer, even though they're not my target customer. But the amount of time and effort that is wasted, which then stops you from doing what you know you should be doing, or finding what you should be doing.
Exactly.
That's quite interesting. So on these programs, is this one of these sort of where you're a cohort? You start the program together, you go through it together, and then these larger scale organizations, I'm guessing the banks, they're all well connected, they know the right customers, they wrap around some services for you so that you feel like you're getting some TLC whilst you're on the program.
Yeah, that's a good summary. It was held at a place called Level 39, which is a sort of innovation hub at Canary Wharf. And then I think there was some sort of mutual benefit for the banks to nurture earlier stage businesses. It helped them with a sort of a brand message of innovation, which was good for them. And it was good for us because we got to try out our services. I think it's actually quite interesting. A lot of founders are not a fan of incubation programs like this because sometimes, in fact, quite often, the companies sponsoring it are the innovation teams, but not the actual business who would land up using the product. I don't think any time's wasted, but I think a lot of businesses enter these programs expecting direct traction.
Yes.
You didn't bring us customers, therefore we failed. And I think you've got to understand the other value in the programs, which are refining your pitch, getting feedback, deciding what your priorities should be. Those are quite valuable too. And you're probably going to do more of those sorts of things than there's not going to be a bunch of people rocking up with some purchase orders on day 5 of the program. That's just not generally how it works.
Yeah. And I guess interesting for you, the people that were running the program were your target customer.
Yeah. So it was coordinated by Accenture, obviously big global consultancy company and systems integrator. And they coordinated pretty much most of the tier 1 banks. I went from a career working with government and I was like, I'm never working with government again. And then you go work with, you sort of people who work with banks, they go, I've never worked with banks again. They do move quite slowly, but actually they do eventually move if you really persist and keep the effort up. So you just have to really commit.
And you touched a couple of times there on things that focus, saying no to some things, customers that might take a while to bite and ultimately buy. How do you sustain that though mentally? Obviously there's the financial side, but really sticking with it, that's tough.
I guess you set yourself some artificial horizons as well, right? So you say, look, we're going to do X for this long. And at the end of that period, we're going to evaluate how we did and just being a bit intentional about it and also being realistic. So accepting that people are not going to move as quick as you'd like them to and really prioritizing what you're working on to maximize your value as well. So if you're working with there was one pilot we were doing where the prospect basically said, my budget's $8,000. I can't remember what it was, but it was relatively low. And we had another prospect where we could see this is a much more significant opportunity. And we're like, what's the value of you really do have to prioritize based on what the outcome is. Probably the $8,000 opportunity was taking up half of our time.
Yeah.
Whereas the $100,000 one was maybe a quarter of it. And we're like, okay, it's pretty clear what we need to do in this scenario. So we were polite, didn't say anything negative to anybody, but we just chose to prioritize our time on the things that made sense for the outcome that we wanted, which was to build a scalable, sustainable business.
Yeah. So let's link into sort of building a team, 2 co-founders. Take us through that sort of, how did you know who were the right kind of people? Take us on that journey, because that's a big one for people who ultimately scale a business.
Yeah, the most important asset you'll have in any business is people. It'd probably be your most expensive asset as well, in most cases. We always felt that people were at the very center of what we did. There's no doubt, like without people, you have nothing. And you have to really value that resource in your organization because it is the very fiber, the being of it. It's really interesting going from 2 founders, you start off doing all of the basics at the beginning. You wear every hat there is and you're passing those responsibilities between you. I think quite early on we were joined by our chief engineer, a lady called Emily Biggs. She was absolutely brilliant. She's a very forthright person, which I really like because she just cut to the chase, was just all about delivery, building the right thing. She built the first version of the product that we then took to market. Through the sort of 10 years that we'd spent at the consultancy previously, we got to know quite a few good people. And it was logical for us to try and find people that we knew we could work well with. When we were scaling the team out, I think we had a sort of pool of resource that we knew we could call upon in a way that was compliant and didn't annoy people. But we were able to call on the folks that we'd worked with previously. That said, sometimes you can also suffer from groupthink a little bit. You should try and diversify the sources of resource and talent that you want to build your business with. And we actually met some interesting folks through London School of Economics. So there was folks studying there that then wanted to go on and do more entrepreneurial things. Got a few of those involved. That was quite interesting because they brought different perspectives. We did a lot. So part of what we did was around cyber threat intelligence. So we formed a relationship with King's College, Department of War Studies, who were running an intelligence degree at the time, and in fact still do. It's quite a reputable one. So we worked with a lot of the graduate cohort from that particular program and landed up recruiting quite heavily from it. People, graduates at the early points of their careers, And we've got to find out their sort of relative strengths and weaknesses quite quickly, because we just threw them at it and got them to try it out, and it went really well. So we ended up scaling quite a bit of our intelligence function through that. We had a few customers that we converted into employees, which was
interesting.
So there was a couple of prospects that we had who got quite excited about what we were doing. And then we got talking a bit further and we're like, oh, actually, you've got some background that was quite interesting to us. And we found we had mutual interest. So we had a couple of customers we ended up recruiting as well.
Interesting. That says something about the company.
I think also recruiting from within was quite key as well.
Yeah.
If you've got a new role, giving people the opportunity to step up and take a bit of a risk often pays off. It doesn't 100% of the time, but I would say 70% of the time we did that, we were broadly successful. Sometimes you have people who have very little career experience, who just have a natural ability to do certain things. And we did find, there was a few folks that really excelled and started flying once you give them the opportunity. They took it with both hands. So by any means possible is the short answer.
And that sounds like was it more opportunistic? Were you considered about this? Who was involved in that? There's some real smart moves in that.
Some of it was intentional. So wherever I've worked, we've always recruited from within. We've always done that. So we knew we would be doing that. I think recruiting people is just, it's much easier to do that. And I would always take personal recommendations over sort of referrals. There are some roles that are much harder to recruit for. So I think the one that I'm sure a lot of the founders you talk about is sales. People their job is to sell. And it turns out that everybody you talk to is selling themselves. They're going to do that. What matters is how they then execute. And I think every founder I talk to says that it's a bit hit and miss, because you won't really know how someone performs unless you can directly reference what they did previously. And the only way to find out often is just to try and see where you get to. Depends on the role a bit.
Interesting. So were there any particular qualities that you prioritized? Because obviously when you're building out skills and capabilities is one part of it. But then whether you call it behaviors or qualities, whatever stamp you put on it, were you proactive about managing your culture?
Yep. Yeah, no, culture is king, right? Everyone says it. So culture is very central to what we do. I think it's quite interesting because we were both US and UK business, and actually in the end Singapore as well. So nationally you have a sort of bit of a culture in each country. But when we talk about culture, it's the things that unite people from different backgrounds. It's not saying that everybody is the same. It's saying that there's certain things you focus on that you look for. We had a values system which had 4 things in it. First and foremost, it was all about the people. We know that our business was all about the people that make it up and their attitude. We want them to be honest and open, but also we want to recognize their value and make sure they recognize their own value they're adding to the business. Trust and be trusted was quite a key one. So if you go from founder to scaling, you can't control everything. You want to give people agency. You want to give them the ability to execute. We will trust them, but we also want them to be trustworthy. So we'd expect their behaviors to be that of someone who is trusted.
Yeah.
So it's a two-way street from that perspective. Do the right thing. So in any circumstance, you'd want people to just make smart decisions about being ethical, transparent, to do things in the interest of the company rather than themselves. So that was quite a core guiding principle for us. And then because we're a technology company, it's all about anything is possible. So it was the culture of innovation, having people listen to each other's ideas and giving them airtime so that people feel confident suggesting new ways of working. was really important. So we wanted to have an environment that fosters innovation, fosters people suggesting things, and give people confidence that they could come forward with new ideas or new ways of working.
So how did you do that?
We did it through a whole bunch of different approaches. One of the things we had was a product team internally that helped specify what the product should be. We had a little skunk work section related to that. We ended up running short projects to try out different ideas that were not a lot of effort to do, but told us whether or not be something that's interesting. Things that would then be successful would then be integrated into the product, and then we ended up delivering them. So we tried to create a product process that would allow for that. It didn't just extend to software, though. It would also extend to things like customer success, to tooling that we chose in the IT teams, the way that we communicated. We did a lot. We were quite early adopters of, rather than doing everything over email, doing it over messaging, which comes with its own downsides as well, right? So it's not all super positive, but sort of just trying to learn from one another about what the best way of doing these things were.
Yeah, because I often find sometimes people will talk about values, but actually it's how it's all lived. So you talk about trust or business. Okay, so tell me exactly, how did that work? And obviously it has to come from the top. And I don't know if you've experienced, but sometimes you'll go into a business and they'll say they've got a value of X, and the lived reality is completely opposite. They might say trust, and no one's trusted to do anything.
Or it's a highly political environment where people's own agendas overcome that of the business. Like, that's one of the one personal peeve of mine. It is a reality, there's politics in any business, but you'd hope you're all rowing in the same direction.
Yeah. Any tough lessons around sort of people that you learned from growing?
Yeah, there's probably a few. I think when something isn't going well, pulling the plug on that quickly, ripping the Band-Aid is really important. And we talk a lot about hiring as growing companies, but we don't talk a lot about firing.
Yes.
And it's almost just as important to be very deliberate and very direct when something is clearly not working, to take action as quickly as possible. And it's very common. I work with other businesses today who still do this, where you're like, maybe they would work out if we change these 3 things, and you should just pull the Band-Aid. It's not about you assessing them as an individual. It's about your assessment of their performance. And if it's not working out, it actually has much broader impact, because if a colleague sees another colleague underperforming and that being allowed to carry on, it creates an environment where you appear to be rewarding behaviors which are not consistent with the goals of the business. And so, to your direct question, I think there probably were a few cases early on where we didn't do that quick enough. And I think we learned, luckily, made those a lot more quickly later on in the business.
And what about cultural differences? You talked about you're in 3 different geographies. Were there any sort of standout differences in terms of?
Loads. It's very interesting being a Brit and taking a business to America. Being a Brit, you're quite circumspect in the way that you talk about things. And you'll say this feature is quite good, but you won't big it up, or you'll just go, you're almost hiding your light under a bushel a little bit. And in America, it really isn't like that. They're super confident. And I know a lot of Brits say, oh, it's quite bolshy and I feel it's a bit brash, but really it's not. They're just being super confident about, committed to the thing they're doing. And I think, honestly, entrepreneurship in America is better for it. And I think the number of really big scaling companies that come out of America are that way because of attitudinally, that is a different thing in the US. So, that's just one example. There's every difference you can imagine, be it political, be it attitudinal, be it cultural. But as I say, the things that really matter are the things that you bring together between those environments. And that's what we focused on, was saying, what are the things that unite us and what are the things that we expect of our business and our people that is common between us. Yeah, it's always going to be a bunch of different cultures, but it's the stuff that unites you that matters.
Yeah. Come full circle, we touched earlier on in the conversation about funding, and you decided as a business that external funding was the route that you were going to take, and it isn't for everyone. Were there any sort of unexpected lessons, surprises in that sort of funding journey? Because you were going through this for the first time, you and Alistair?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess we're a B2B software company, so it's quite good in our space because there are a lot of stories and templates shared of how businesses go through that process.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say there were any surprises. We expected the challenges that were there to be there. So we weren't, that's a bit different. It was all expected. I think we very intentionally did that because we knew that we wanted to scale quite quickly and we didn't want to build something that was just organically growing. We wanted to introduce capital that would help it scale a lot. And in the end, we raised $60 million and that scaled us to exit the business 160 million in July of 22. And I think the things I've expected from some of the people that I spoke to, we spoke to a lot of other founders, was that your board will be made up by your investors, which they were.
Yeah.
All the investors say they add value. I think some of our investors added value. I wouldn't say all of them did.
Yeah.
I think you want to choose investors who are on the journey with you and can partner with you. That means that you should take money from people that understand your space a bit. And I think what you've got to really ask yourself the question about is when things aren't going exactly right, because things won't always go exactly right, that those people will be on your side and dig in and help you with the problem rather than throw rocks from the outside and just give you another problem to deal with on top of the one you already have.
Yes.
And largely we made some good choices. So I'm really pleased that was the case. But I do hear some horror stories from other founders who basically they had someone to invest in the business and they were there simply as a transactional thing. Here's some money. It's not going well. Oh no, we're going to pull the plug. And it's all horrible. I think being a bit cautious, if you can, being a bit cautious and intentional about who you bring on. It's not always the amount of money or the valuation that matters. It's who they are that matters quite a lot. But like I say, it's not, so it's quite interesting. There's other types of funding, right? There's debt, there's private equity, we didn't do any of those things. We specifically chose venture capital, which comes with its own set of expectations.
Yeah.
And actually, there's some really great cybersecurity businesses which are completely bootstrapped. And I love those businesses. I think that's awesome that those businesses have been able to scale in that way. That's just superb. And in those cases, the founders have total control of the business.
Yeah.
And they probably have a bit more freedom than a venture-backed business.
Yeah, because I guess part of your job is you've just got a different type of leadership team, haven't you, really? The people around the table. But like anything, it's about building trust and transparency and giving critical challenge and all that good stuff. So like you say, I guess the piece that I take away from what you just said is that you've got to feel like they're in it with you.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
As opposed to wagging the finger and it be one direction. So that's really useful. So moving more to you on a more personal note, we've talked a lot about the business. If you could give your younger self one piece of advice, if you were starting, let's just make it more specific, if you were starting Digital Shadows again, what piece of advice would you give yourself?
Stick with it. It's an awesome idea. It'll be great. I've never looked back and regretted what we did. And I think actually every entrepreneur that I've spoken to, I can't think of one where this isn't the case. So I've never met an entrepreneur that regretted making the leap. I definitely have no regrets at all in doing that. Even if the first idea or the first two ideas aren't the ones that work out, just think about the learning you get from that experience. And it's really valuable. And you can work for yourself in all sorts of different ways. But doing something you believe in and doing something that is yours, and it was something that you conceived of and you're seeing it through, is immensely satisfying. So my advice to myself would be just go for it. I think in those early stages, you do have a bit of self-doubt, and
Yes.
there's always imposter syndrome throughout, right? You're double second guessing yourself quite a lot of the time. So I think just telling myself to chill out a little bit and go for it.
And do you think it helped co-founding as opposed to
I personally think so. I actually invest in businesses now, and one of my criterion is one of the most important things you invest in is the people and the team. I'm not saying that businesses that have only one founder are bad, because they're not. There's some really brilliant businesses out there. But I think when you have a single founder, you have to explore how the dynamics in the leadership team work there, and whether that individual can empower trust in those that are around them to help them deliver the journey. So I personally loved being a co-founder alongside Alistair, because we brought different things to the process, and actually respectful disagreement was a very useful tool for us to grow the business. I personally find businesses that have more than one founder a bit easier to invest in than single founder businesses, because there's less of a question about how they can work together. I actually have had the opposite problem, though. There are some businesses that have too many founders. And then it's a bit of a hot mess trying to work out, they're all competing for control, or even if it's not explicit, and that can get a bit messy as well. But in general, yes, co-founding I think is a positive thing.
Sort of sticking with you, what sort of tools or frameworks have you been able to draw on through the years that enable you to keep your feet on the ground?
I guess having done consultancy for the best part of a decade prior to running the business, it gives you things like being able to use the data to drive decision making, and to be methodical in the way that you plan something, execute it, and then measure whether that impact worked or not. I think being experimental, I've worked in innovation teams quite a bit prior to Digital Shadows, so having this idea of iterating what you're doing, short cycles, and then testing at the end of the cycle to see whether it was the way you intended it to be, or even better. So I think a lot of what I've applied has come from consulting, even the people side as well, like fostering relationships with customers, building partnerships was really important part of what we did. So our customers didn't feel like it was a customer vendor relationship, it was more like a collaboration between us and them. That was really important.
So what about on a more personal, being a founder can be lonely? I know you're a co-founder, so maybe not so lonely, but the stresses and strains that come with scaling, having investors. What strategies have you used to overcome those kinds of challenges?
Creating a network outside of the business was quite important. We luckily were in a cohort of other cybersecurity SaaS companies, so we found peers across our network, which some people I'm still very good friends with today. That was really important, because there's some things you can't share with employees because it's privileged information, so you need to have someone you can bounce ideas off of and compare notes with. So that happened quite naturally, actually.
Any sort of books that you've read or more commercial type frameworks where you've had one of those light bulb moments that you think is worth sharing with people?
I guess there's been a few. I'm a big fan of MEDDIC or MEDDIC, if you've looked at that from sales point of view. Lots of sales methodologies out there. Miller Hyman Gold Blue Sheets was quite good as well. But I think MEDDIC is pretty much standard these days for selling, and for good reason. It's a really great framework. It's very good for being methodical about deals and trying to go through pipelines and work out what's valuable. I think it's the 5 dysfunctions of a team.
Yes, I know.
I've always liked that as well. Sort of talking about what it is about teams when they don't work and trying to find those things out and change them when you spot them. So those would be two I can think of. There's probably been a few more along the way, but those are 2 that stand out.
And what about any people have this idea of getting a business off the ground and scaling a business, and some of it written by people who probably haven't been through the realities. Are there any myths that you would like to bust about scaling a business?
I guess quite early on in Y Combinator times, so I'm actually sat in an office like just on Old Street Roundabout here, and in 2011, 2012, the Silicon Roundabout thing was happening.
Yes.
Y Combinator quite early on founded some early stage businesses, then scaled and sold. And there was this sort of template. It was like, well, you probably run your business for a couple of years, and then 2 years later, someone will buy you and it'll all be fine and it'll be great. And nothing could be further from the truth. I think every founder I meet has been on a 10-year slog.
Yeah.
It is a big commitment. And I think whilst we knew it wasn't going to be 2 years early on, actually, it was a bit longer than I thought at the very beginning. It's okay that it was. And I'm probably a bit grayer and older as a result of it. But yeah, I think you shouldn't be, I'm a big believer that something I've observed in my life, I've done things in 10-year chunks throughout my life.
Yeah.
And it does feel like one of those chunks or epochs is running a business. You should think about it as a very serious commitment. I quite like 10-year epochs. If you live your working life in 4 or 5 epochs, then I think that's a good way to think about the world. So whether those are work or startup or riding bikes, whatever.
Superb. We're getting towards the end now. I've just got a few more questions, if I may. Do you think there are any overlooked opportunities or challenges that you see for founders scaling in today's climate?
I think a lot of people are quite down on the incubators. I think the way to look at them is as a way to refine they are doing useful things, although I think a lot of founders have an aversion to them because it doesn't equal purchase order tomorrow. That is the right attitude. You've got to follow the money, right? But they have value beyond just purchase orders. They have value by getting you to explain what you do and get it out in front of as many people as possible.
Yeah.
I would say probably that, actually. Just try and find the things that are right for your business and do a few of them, because you will learn. I think the other thing is viewing failure as a negative is really important.
Yeah.
And I know it's a bit cheesy to say it, but the more you fail, the better almost, because you're another step towards knowing what you need to do. So you're reducing the unknown space into a known space. And it's, I think most founders are quite alive to that, to be honest, recognizing failure. A lot of people do talk about it, but I think really embracing failure is emotionally difficult to do.
Yes.
And actually, there's another observation of Brits. We don't embrace failure culturally very well.
And I think that is from really early on, right through school.
It's interesting, isn't it?
I really do think it is literally ingrained in us.
Yeah, I think you've got to get back on the bike.
And one phrase that always sticks with me was John Cornwall is someone I've interviewed as part of the podcast. We did a big project for John when John had got a round of funding. And I was asking John, what was it like going through round after round? He said somebody had said to him, look, John, it's all about collecting no's. Keep collecting those no's. The more you learn from the no's, you'll eventually get to your yes. And
exactly.
It's that principle, isn't it? It's exactly what you've just been saying. With your product, something will fail, but you learn from it. My guess would be it's very different in the US. They really will embrace failure. And I do think in Oz, we talk about it a lot in the UK, but I think we do find it really challenging to go to a dinner party on a very practical level and say, I did this and it failed, because we think, that feels uncomfortable.
Exactly.
So anything else that you would, as a sort of a closing to the conversation, anything that you think is worth sharing that we haven't covered to anyone who is scaling a business?
I guess don't be scared about getting it wrong. Really, back to the point you're just making, it's okay if it doesn't go right on day one. And a lot of people will tell you that you see a lot of nice graphs of businesses where they start small and they go big, and it's almost like a straight line between the small and the big bit. And that's the story they're telling their investors and their prospects, which is a wonderful story to tell. But the reality is nothing like that. Like, it's zigzaggy. You'll hit stuff along the way that isn't what you expected, and that's okay. You just need to learn quickly enough so that you can then change direction or you've got to create the envelopes of risk where you can afford to try things out in. And by envelopes of risk, what I mean is make sure you understand your runway, understand what space you have to make changes in direction, what spaces you have to experiment, and use them frugally, but so that then you can pick the ones that are the things that really get you to the next stage. So just being honest with yourself. And actually very early on, like Al and I quit our job, we had some savings, like our funding was our own for the first year. I think my wife, I don't know how my wife allowed me to agree to not pay the mortgage for a year, but she did. We had that's a really valuable time. Like, how unique is that? How often in your life will you be in that situation? Maybe once, if that. So just make the most of it. This is a unique moment in time.
Superb. What a way to end. So I would love to say a huge thank you. Loads of value packed in there, James. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. I'm confident that those who tune in certainly will. Thank you very much. That's it for this episode of Scaling Stories Unfiltered. And if you got value from today's conversation, hit the subscribe button and leave a. It helps me more than it means I can continue to interview some amazing people and share their stories.